Welcome back to the Sleepy Horror Vault, the channel where horror meets rest. Each story carefully designed to help you drift off faster, sleep deeper, and wake up remembering just enough to wonder if it was all a dream or something more. Tonight's tale takes us to Melbourne, Australia, where in 1966, over 200 students and teachers witnessed something impossible, an unidentified flying object hovering above Westall High School before vanishing without a trace. What began as a bizarre local event soon unraveled into something far stranger and far more terrifying. This is the story of a 1966 Westall UFO. What was once dismissed as fantasy is coming back, piece by piece. And the people who saw it, they're starting to remember. Some of them wish they hadn't. So get comfortable, let the music ease your mind, and allow the story to take you wherever it needs to go. You're safe here, in the Sleepy Horror Vault. For now.
Chapter 1. The Return to Westall. It had been nearly 60 years since April 6, 1966, yet the memory still clung to Eleanor Keene like dried blood under the nails. The image of that silver disc floating silently above the school oval had never left her. Not entirely. Even when the officials came, even when they told the students to never speak of it again, even after the strange disappearances that followed, the memory was always there, pulsing just beneath the surface like a long-forgotten scar. And now she was going back. The invitation arrived in a plain white envelope. No return address, no sender. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Westall High, April 6th, 10 a.m. Some things were never finished. Underneath the words was a photocopied image of the 1966 Westall schoolyard, grainy and time-worn. She stared at it for a long while before carefully folding it back up and placing it on her nightstand. She didn't need to check her calendar. She already knew she would go. They gathered like ghosts. 5 of them, all former students who had witnessed the event firsthand. Eleanor, Vincent Marsh, Lillian Cho, Marcus Bain, and David Youssef. They stood on the overgrown edge of the school oval, now cracked and fenced off, as if the land itself wanted to forget what had happened there. The school had been rebuilt, expanded, modernized, but the field was untouched, frozen in time. "It feels wrong," Marcus said, rubbing his hands together even though the air was warm. "Like something's watching us." "You think it ever stopped?" Lillian muttered, her eyes scanning the sky. David had brought an old camcorder, pure nostalgia, and was filming everything. "For posterity," he said with a smirk. "In case we vanish." No one laughed. As the group moved slowly across the field, Eleanor felt a deep hum begin in her chest. It wasn't sound exactly, more like a memory vibrating through her bones. The feeling grew stronger as they approached the center of the oval. That's when she saw it. A burn mark, perfectly circular, barely visible under the grass. It hadn't been there when she visited 10 years ago. Her breath hitched. "Guys," she whispered, "look." They circled around the mark in silence. Then came the sound, soft at first like wind through aluminum. But it grew sharper, higher in pitch until David's camcorder started glitching. "Cutting out," he said, tapping the device. "It's like interference." Then the light changed. Everything turned dull, washed out, like the color had been drained from the world. Shadows became too long. Sounds muted. Birds that had been chirping moments ago were suddenly silent. "Do you feel that?" Lillian asked. "Like we're not here anymore?" Eleanor turned in a slow circle. The school buildings had faded into a foggy blur. The sun looked wrong, too dim, too far away. And then just past the tree line she saw something move. Not a person, not an animal. Something tall. It stood still, half hidden in the shadows. No features, just the outline of something vaguely humanoid, but too elongated, too still, as if reality had been stretched around it like plastic wrap. And then it vanished. They left the oval in silence, the spell breaking only once they reached the fence. The colors returned. The sun brightened. But the hum in Eleanor's chest remained. Back at the car park, Vincent lit a cigarette with trembling fingers. "What the hell just happened?" "It's starting again," Eleanor said. "They're not done with us." Marcus checked his phone. No signal. He looked up. I think we just stepped into something we weren't meant to find. Lillian reached into her bag and pulled out a folded page. A printed image from decades ago, taken by an anonymous student before the camera was confiscated. It showed the disc hovering with blurred figures beneath it. One of the figures looked just like Eleanor, except she hadn't been standing there that day. He was sure of it. David played back his footage. Static. Noise. Then for a brief second, just before the glitch, a single frame flickered onto the screen. Face. Not human. Watching them. Smiling. Chapter 2. Static in the Blood. The dream started that night. Eleanor woke up drenched in sweat, her sheets tangled like she'd been wrestling something in her sleep. Her mouth was dry and a dull ringing echoed in her ears. The dream itself slipped away the moment she opened her eyes, but a single word stuck in her brain like a thorn. Return. It echoed without sound, not spoken but etched into her thoughts like graffiti carved into the walls of memory. She stumbled to the bathroom, flicking on the light, and gasped. Her nose was bleeding. Not a little trickle. A thin, steady stream like someone had turned on a tap. She grabbed a towel and leaned over the sink, heart racing. Something inside her pulsed. The group met again the next day in Vincent's motel room. He looked worse than yesterday. Sunken eyes, trembling hands, chain smoking like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. I didn't sleep, he said. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back there, but not as a kid. As me. No. Staring at the sky, but the sky was alive. No dreams for me, David said, fiddling with his camcorder. But my footage is still fried. Even my phone's corrupted. All videos gone. It's like we never recorded anything. I tried calling my sister last night, Marcus added. The line was full of static. Then this voice cut through, whispering my name. I swear to God it sounded like me, but younger. They fell into a stunned silence. Then Lillian spoke. Something happened to us out there. Not just in 1966. Yesterday. Time's memory. It's all unraveling. We opened a door. Eleanor looked up. Or it opened us. Later that afternoon she visited the library, determined to find old archives. Anything not scrubbed clean by whatever government arm had erased Westall's truth. Buried in microfilm records, she found an article that hadn't made national circulation. It was printed in a small-town tabloid just days after the sighting. Girl missing after Westall incident. Family claims bright man in the sky took her. There was a name, Emily Carr, age 13. A girl Eleanor vaguely remembered. I sat near the back of the class. Never talked much. The article said she vanished walking home the day after the sighting. No body. No clues. No investigation. Just gone. Eleanor sat back, chills crawling up her spine. The date of the article? April 7, 1966. Tomorrow would mark exactly 59 years since Emily disappeared. That night, Eleanor couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Her motel room felt too still. The lights buzzed strangely, the shadows didn't move right. She decided to sleep with the TV on, hoping the static might drown out whatever her subconscious was trying to surface. Sometime past midnight, she awoke to the screen glowing pure blue. No sound, no channel, and then it changed. Not to a program, but to her. Footage of her standing in the oval from David's camcorder. Except, she hadn't seen this part. She was alone in the shot. No one else around. The sky in the background shimmered like liquid mercury, and just behind her, something began to emerge. Long limbs, black eyes, thin mouth curled into something approximating a grin. Her doppelganger on screen didn't notice, but the being behind her lifted a hand and placed it gently on her shoulder. The screen cut to black. She screamed. By the time Vincent and Marcus burst into her room from next door, the TV was off. Nothing unusual. No sign of anything. The camcorder, sitting untouched in David's bag, hadn't even been powered on. "You're not crazy," Vincent whispered after checking the room. "I saw something too. My mirror. My reflection moved before I did." Eleanor pressed her hand against her chest. That humming feeling again. Stronger. I think, she said, her voice barely audible. They're calling us back one by one. The next morning, David didn't show up. They checked his motel room, no answer. The door was unlocked. Inside, everything looked normal at first. Clothes folded, camcorder gone, phone on the nightstand. But on the mirror was a single handprint. Long, thin. Too many fingers. Written underneath, in something that looked disturbingly like dried blood, was a single word. Home. Chapter 3: The Erased. The police didn't seem to care that David was missing. To them, he was just another dropout turned conspiracy nut who had skipped town. No signs of struggle. No body. No concern. But the others knew better. When Eleanor, Vincent, Marcus, and Lillian returned to the motel room that evening, they found David's belongings still untouched. His bag was zipped shut, the covers on the bed were smoothed out as if ironed, and a single LED on his charger still blinked. But something was wrong. Not just in the room, in the air. "Do you smell that?" Marcus asked, sniffing sharply. "Like metal and ozone. Like when lightning's about to strike," Lillian said. Vincent, meanwhile, stood frozen in front of the nightstand. "What?" Eleanor asked him, stepping closer. He held up a framed photograph. It had been sitting in the room all along, probably placed there by hotel staff. A stock image of the Melbourne skyline. Dull, inoffensive. But now it had changed. The sky was darker. The colors off. And in the far left corner, almost blurred into the clouds, was a black object. Oval-shaped. Just hovering. No one spoke for a long time. Then Vincent turned the frame over. On the back, written in neat red ink, "You were never here." They tried calling David's family. The number disconnected. Facebook, deleted. Old articles, unavailable. Even the Westall School reunion photo they remembered him in, the one from 1986, was now missing his face. The space between Eleanor and Marcus where David once stood was now a blank column of gray static. Like someone had cut him out. Literally. "I think we're being erased," Lillian whispered. "Not just from now. From everything." Marcus sat back in the motel chair, pale. "You're saying this thing, whatever it is, it's going back through our lives and deleting us? Or rewriting us," Eleanor added. "Like we're just code." "Maybe we are," Vincent muttered. They decided not to split up after that. The motel gave them 2 adjoining rooms and they pushed the beds together so they could sleep in the same space. But sleep didn't come easy. That night, Marcus woke gasping, clutching at his neck like he was choking. The others jolted upright. The room was freezing, the kind of cold that gets into the bones. Marcus was drenched in sweat, eyes wide. It was like, I was in a hospital. But not here. Not now. The walls were smooth and glowing. No doors. I could feel something watching me. I couldn't move. "Sleep paralysis?" Eleanor asked. He shook his head violently. "No, it was real. I felt something inside me like it was poking around in my brain." Vincent grabbed a notebook from the nightstand and handed it to him. "Draw what you saw." Marcus did. Slowly, with a trembling hand, he sketched the room. Smooth curves. A faint glow in the walls. And in the center, a tall, thin figure. No face. No hands. Just darkness wearing skin. The next morning, Eleanor decided to go back to the site. The oval, now surrounded by rusted chain link and tall grass. The others followed cautiously. This time they brought equipment. EMF meters. Voice recorders. Infrared cameras. All borrowed from a local paranormal group Vincent had contacted. They were more than happy to lend them gear after hearing UFO Westall still active. The closer they got to the burn mark from 2 days ago, the heavier the air felt. Eleanor's ears started to ring. Lillian stumbled, grabbing her arm. "I feel sick," she said. Like something's pressing down on my chest." Eleanor looked around. The sky above the oval had taken on that same wrong tone again. Colors dulled, birds gone silent. The wind stopped completely. Even their breath felt muted, as though the air was being pulled somewhere else. Then the EMF meter spiked. The voice recorder started playing itself. Static. Then a voice. They were not supposed to remember. Vincent turned pale. That's my voice. Then a second voice. Return. We are incomplete. Marcus suddenly doubled over, clutching his head. I remember something from when I was a kid. They helped him sit. He stared at the ground, eyes wide. They told me I'd forget. After it happened in '66, I was taken, just for a moment. Bright room, cold hands, but I wasn't alone. There were others. Kids, floating, sleeping. Eleanor's stomach churned. Why didn't you say anything? I didn't remember until just now, Marcus said, tears in his eyes. But they put something in me, like a tracker. Later that night, Lillian vanished. She had gone outside for a smoke just a few steps from the room. He never came back. When the others searched the parking lot, they found only her lighter, still warm, and her phone, open to a photo she'd taken hours earlier. The image showed Eleanor, Vincent, and Marcus in the motel room, sitting on the bed. But Lillian wasn't in the picture, even though she had taken it herself. Eleanor screamed. Vincent said nothing, just went back inside and began tearing the motel room apart. Behind the mattress, under the frame tucked beneath the carpet, he found it. A slip of paper, folded tight. On it was a class photo from Westall High 1966. They were all there, kids again. Eleanor, Marcus, Vincent, Lillian, even David. But the bottom half of the image had begun to fade. One by one, their faces were dissolving into static. And in the background, hovering faintly above the school, was the same silver disc. Watching, waiting. Chapter 4. Drift between realities. Eleanor stopped trusting mirrors. She covered the ones in the motel with towels and duct tape. In reflections, her eyes didn't always match. Sometimes her expression would lag, like her reflection had to catch up. One time she saw something else entirely. A different version of herself, mouth open, eyes empty, screaming. Marcus didn't question her paranoia. After Lillian vanished, they all started unraveling in their own ways. Vincent was barely speaking. He'd begun keeping a journal, pages and pages of scratchy notes, diagrams, and symbols he claimed came to him in flashes. Eleanor had peeked at them once. Words written backward, coordinates that didn't exist. Repeated phrases like, memory is a virus, and they live in the negative space. She asked him what that meant. Vincent just looked at her and said, "Do you remember your father's name?" She opened her mouth to answer, but nothing came. They left the motel that night, too afraid to stay in one place for long. Something was tracking them, they all felt it. Marcus had started bleeding from his nose again. He said it felt like pressure building inside his skull, like static. "Something's trying to force its way in," he whispered. "I think it's always been there, just dormant." They drove through the dark outskirts of Melbourne, sticking to the smaller roads. Every street lamp they passed flickered as they approached. One even shattered overhead, sending glass raining down on the car roof. When they reached an old service road near the Dandenong Ranges, Eleanor suddenly said, "Stop." Vincent hit the brakes. "What is it?" "I don't know," she said slowly, stepping out. "But I think I've been here before." Marcus followed her gaze. It was just a patch of empty land. Overgrown, forgotten. A broken sign barely standing at the edge of the fence read, "Westall Sanitarium, closed 1972. The gate was rusted shut, but they climbed over it easily. Beyond the fence, the land stretched into shadows. The ruins of the sanitarium lay half swallowed by nature. Collapsed walls, twisted beams, creeping vines. The stars overhead seemed dimmer here, like the sky was holding its breath. "This wasn't here on the maps," Marcus said. Vincent checked his GPS. It spun in place, the arrow drifting slowly in a circle. Then Eleanor saw the symbol. Carved into a stone slab near the entrance was a crude etching. A circle with a line through it, then a smaller dot hovering above. She had seen it before. In her dreams. On Vincent's drawings. On David's camcorder just before it glitched. A sound rose behind them. Soft at first. A low vibrating hum. They turned around slowly and saw the field. It shouldn't have been there. Yet just beyond the ruins, impossibly folded into the geography, was the Westall School oval. Pristine, green, under daylight. But it was nearly midnight. Vincent muttered, "This is wrong. This is so wrong." They stepped forward and were swallowed by light. Eleanor blinked. She was standing in the middle of the school oval. Except it wasn't 2025 anymore. The air smelled like fresh grass. The sky was impossibly blue. She heard children laughing in the distance, the distant echo of a school bell. Then she saw herself, 12 years old, standing under the gum trees, staring at the sky. "Don't move," she heard a voice say. She turned. It was Vincent, but younger too, barely older than a teenager. "We're not supposed to be here," he said. "I think we always were," Eleanor replied. Then the sky began to ripple, like water disturbed by a drop. The sun dimmed. The laughter stopped. Everyone in the field turned their heads toward the sky at once, including young Eleanor. Then it came. A silver disc. Silent. Smooth. Falling without falling. It didn't descend. It slipped, folding downward in unnatural angles. And from the edge of the craft, something detached. Something long. Something reaching. A sound split the air. Not a scream. Not exactly. It was as if the world itself was being pulled apart, screaming in frequencies humans weren't meant to hear. And then, black. Eleanor awoke, gasping in the backseat of the car. Vincent swerved as she sat up, nearly driving into a ditch. "Jesus," he barked. "You scared the hell out of me." Marcus turned in the passenger seat. "You passed out. You've been out for 20 minutes. Eleanor wiped her face. She was sweating. Her hands were shaking. It wasn't a dream. Vincent didn't ask what she saw. He didn't need to, because he'd seen it too. "The oval," he said quietly. "It was there again, wasn't it?" She nodded. Marcus leaned forward. "Eleanor, what happened to us?" She didn't answer, because now, finally, she remembered. The men in black suits, the glowing rooms, the figures whispering in her mind, the removal, the moment when they were pulled from time, inspected, observed, and put back like nothing happened. Except it wasn't the same version of her they returned. Not quite. Later that night, they reached the edge of town and found a payphone still standing. Eleanor dialed her old home number out of instinct, just to hear a voice from the world she remembered. A woman answered. Not her mother. Not anyone she recognized. "Who is this?" Eleanor asked. The voice paused. Then, "You're not supposed to be calling." The line cut. In the rearview mirror, Vincent saw something moving. He slowed the car. Along the side of the road, 6 figures stood perfectly still. Thin. Bucket. No mouths. Just silence. Marcus whispered. "They're watching us again." Eleanor didn't look. He didn't need to. She already knew. They weren't just being tracked. They were being guided. And the road ahead wasn't leading them away from danger. It was leading them home. Wherever or whatever that meant. Chapter 5. The harvested comma. The town looked familiar, but only in the way dreams do. Buildings stood where they shouldn't. Roads curved wrong. Signs bore names that felt almost right, like replicas drawn from half-remembered memories. Westall was no longer Westall. It was an imitation. "This isn't where we grew up," Eleanor muttered as they rolled slowly down what used to be Dandenong Road. "No," Marcus said, eyes scanning the flickering street lamps. "But it wants us to think it is." They stopped at an old gas station, one that hadn't been in service for decades. The lights above the pumps glowed faint blue, even though no power lines connected them. Vincent stepped out, scanning the empty horizon. The silence was wrong, thick and humming with an unseen pulse. He lit a cigarette with shaking hands. Inside the convenience store, Eleanor walked the dusty aisles. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. Brand labels from the 60s. Prices frozen in time. A radio on the counter played static intercut with old swing music, but only the same 10 seconds looped over and over. She stared at a bag of candy called Astro Chews. The mascot on the package wore a silver suit and an oversized helmet. It had no face, just black. Back in the car, Marcus was quiet. He hadn't said much since the oval reappeared. Now he rubbed at his arms constantly, like trying to scrub something off beneath his skin. "Do you hear it?" he whispered. Eleanor turned. "Hear what?" He didn't answer. He just opened the door and walked off into the dark. They called after him, shouted his name, but Marcus didn't look back. They found him standing at the edge of a wheat field a few kilometers outside town. The crops were dead, gray, and humming. He stood perfectly still, staring up at the sky. "I remember now," he said. "All of it." Vincent moved closer. "What did they do to us?" "They didn't do anything," Marcus said calmly. "We volunteered." Eleanor's heart dropped. "What are you talking about?" "They made us forget. But we agreed. Long ago. We were children. But we said yes." "To what?" Marcus turned around slowly. "To go home." Then the sky above them cracked. Not thunder. Not lightning. The sky opened. A tear in the fabric of night, revealing a smooth metallic underbelly. Light spun without movement. Geometry made no earthly sense. A sound followed, low, rumbling, full of weight like gravity grinding against bone. Eleanor dropped to her knees, clutching her skull. Vincent screamed. Marcus didn't move. From the field, dark shapes began to rise. Not from the ground, but from the air itself. Like ink spreading in water, they formed tall silhouettes. Faceless, limbless, hovering, and then voices. But not outside. They will not all accept. Some must be reprocessed. Harvest begins. Vincent stumbled forward and grabbed Marcus by the shirt. "Snap out of it. We're not going anywhere." Marcus just smiled. And then he began to dissolve, piece by piece. Not blood, not flesh, pixels, like he was being deconstructed and streamed upward into the craft. "No, no, no," Eleanor screamed, reaching out. But all that remained of Marcus was the outline of where he had stood, burned into the wheat in a perfect ring. Gone. They ran. Back into the car. Tires screeched against asphalt that felt too soft. Lights blinked erratically overhead. The radio came on by itself, playing whispers instead of music. One remains. One resists. Termination possible. Who are they talking about? Vincent shouted. But Eleanor already knew. They didn't go back to the motel. They drove toward the sea. Something told Eleanor the water would slow them, or whatever was following them. She didn't know if it was instinct, or if they had put that idea in her head. By the time they reached the cliffs outside Mornington, it was almost dawn. The sky shimmered again, not the opening, not yet, but a pulse. Like the world itself was breathing. Vincent stepped out and walked toward the edge. "I think I'm breaking," he said. "I can't tell what's mine anymore. My memories, my thoughts. I remember my mother with green eyes. But she had brown. Or maybe she never existed at all." He turned to Eleanor. "If we're not real, what are we?" He looked at him, really looked, and for a brief moment, his face shifted. Not physically, but like the air around him flickered, and for a millisecond she saw another face behind his. Something not human. Something trying to remember how to be human. He blinked, and it was gone. They slept in the car as the sun rose. When Eleanor awoke, Vincent was gone. No sign of a struggle. No blood. Just his journal sitting neatly on the dashboard. She opened it, hoping for answers. Instead, she found one sentence repeated across dozens of pages. "You were never meant to wake up." Chapter 6. The Ones Who Stayed, Eleanor didn't remember falling asleep. He just was. Floating. Not in the car anymore. Not on Earth. Not anywhere real. Everything around her pulsed in soft blue light. No walls. No sky. Just smooth curvature and distant echoes, like she was inside a living thing. Her feet hovered just above the ground. She felt no weight, no pain, no panic, only a presence. Then, a whisper. "You stayed." She turned around slowly. They stood before her. Figures of light and shadow, shifting and stretching, never fully forming. They had no eyes, no mouths, yet somehow she could feel them seeing her. They radiated thought, not words but impressions. You remembered. You resisted. You are not like the others. She tried to speak, but her voice didn't exist here. Instead, her memories answered. She remembered being 12, the craft above the oval, the wind freezing, the silence. She remembered the moment she was pulled. Time suspended. Her classmates frozen in place. The light swallowing her whole. Then, the void. A place of examination, of questioning, of choice. They didn't take everyone. Only those who said yes. Even if they didn't know what they were agreeing to. They asked, "Will you stay with us?" And Eleanor, scared and curious, had said yes. But they didn't keep her. Not then. Because one of the others had intervened. The image came like a jolt to the chest. Lillian, she had screamed, reached out, pulled Eleanor back as the light tried to take her. Lillian had taken her place. Lillian stayed. That's why Eleanor's memories were different. That's why they came for her now. She was unfinished, incomplete. She was the one who got away, and they couldn't allow that. Back in the waking world. If it was the waking world, Eleanor opened her eyes to find herself in the school again. Not the ruins. Not the warped version from earlier. The real Westall. April 6, 1966. She stood on the oval, barefoot in her school uniform. Children screamed in delight nearby. The sky was impossibly blue. And then, it changed. The disk appeared. A shimmer in the clouds, folding downward. Everything froze. Except her. One by one. The students turned. Not slowly. Not naturally. Synchronized. They all stared at her. Silent. Motionless. And from behind them a shape moved forward. Tall. Elegant. Humanoid in outline. But its face was a mirror. When Eleanor looked into it, she saw herself. Not her face now. Not her face then. But every version of herself she had ever been. Every possibility. Every decision not taken. "There is a fracture in you," it said. Not aloud, but in her bones. "You are a nexus point. Your choice must be completed." She whispered. "I didn't know what I was saying yes to, back then. You do now." And then, the offer came again. "Will you stay with us?" Her chest ached. The hum in her ribs, the one that had been there since the oval, pulsed stronger now. She realized what it was. A beacon. A signal. She was a beacon. A thread. Calling them back into this world. They hadn't returned by force. She had brought them. With memory. With defiance. With fear. She looked up at the mirror-faced being. And for the first time, she said, "No." The world collapsed. Not like an explosion, but like a light bulb blown out from the inside. Darkness rushed inward. Wind roared. The children vanished. The sky cracked open. The oval disintegrated beneath her. And then, silence. She woke up in a hospital bed. White sheets. Pale walls. A steady beep beside her. A nurse stood by the window smiling kindly. "Good to see you're awake, Eleanor," she said. Eleanor blinked. Where am I?" "St. Vincent's," the nurse replied. "You were found unconscious in a field outside Melbourne. No ID. No injuries. Just asleep." Eleanor sat up slowly. Her body felt heavy. A mirror on the wall reflected a face she didn't recognize. She looked 60, maybe older. But it was her. Her hands trembled. "How long was I out?" The nurse hesitated. then quietly said, 59 years. Epilogue, April 6, 2025. The news didn't say much. A woman was found wandering the ruins of Westall High School, barefoot, disoriented, dressed in a torn school uniform decades out of date. She was taken in for medical evaluation. Authorities called it a case of severe dissociative fugue. No name, no family, no records. They said she kept mumbling the same phrase to herself. I said no. I said no. I said no. A nurse noted that her heartbeat occasionally stopped for nearly 30 seconds at a time, only to resume on its own, stronger, louder, like a second rhythm was buried beneath the first. They ran her prints through every known database. Nothing. No matches. It was as if she'd never existed. Later, in a quiet hallway of the hospital's restricted wing, a janitor passed her room and found the door slightly open. Inside, the woman was sitting in the dark, staring at the mirror. She didn't look away, didn't blink. He just whispered, "Some of us stayed, some of us came back, but none of us were ever meant to leave." Then the lights flickered, and the sky outside turned the color of burning silver.
The story is over now. And by now, I imagine you're already asleep, drifting somewhere quiet, somewhere familiar, maybe even a street you almost remember. But if you're still awake, that's okay too. Just breathe slowly. Let the weight of the day fade away. The music you're hearing is designed to help you fall asleep faster and sink deeper into rest. Even if strange dreams follow, there are no more tapes tonight. No more humming. Just your body relaxing and your mind slipping softly into sleep. Thank you for spending your night with us here in the Sleepy Horror Vault. Until next time, sweet dreams.